That slack Southern dialect the biologist hadn't entirely lost, despite years of willing exile. He'd been at his mother's a week when the boarding school called. A histrionic voice informed him that someone they trusted had put in a good word, and the biologist was left wondering who the unexpected benefactor might be. They had to say everything twice, not because he wasn't paying attention, but because he was struggling to absorb his new, albeit impermanent, life. He was a substitute teacher now, biology and ecology, 4 courses at an all-girls school on the outskirts of the dwarf city. A few days later, driving down the highway in a beat-up Mazda 323, as the morning sun revealed little by little the rippling of the coffee fields, the blue of the Cordillera, he was filled with excitement, thinking for the first time that maybe he could get used to this place after all, could learn how to live here again. "I'll adapt," he thought, smiling because, of course, that's the word that had come to him. But resistance kicked in almost instantly. This country is as cunning as the devil. 2. On the campus, there were 3 buildings, one very large one with 3 floors and a paved schoolyard, a smaller one where the girls' rooms were, and a chapel. Everything was painted a verdant blue, which shimmered in the permanent humidity. The region was temperate, mountainous. In the exterior corridor where he was waiting for the director, the biologist noticed a shell-shaped niche that housed the Virgin Mary. The statue was humble, plaster cast, unlikely to awaken anyone's fervor. Left to fend for herself in the wall, she fulfilled a dubious decorative role. The biologist didn't have time to guess at the reason for her neglect, since just then the director showed up and summoned him into her office. She reiterated point-blank that the usual teacher was only on leave. "This is temporary," she warned. She was frank about the money, too, and the teaching load. She seemed like a resolute woman, one who never wasted time, and the biologist saw himself swept along by all her executive vigor, saying yes again and again, as if signing on to some colonial venture or research expedition. They assigned him a desk in the teacher's lounge, not the one that should have belonged to him, given that he was standing in as head lecturer. The young math teacher would sit there, but a smaller one, in front of a window facing the basketball court, a garden, and the barbed wire fence of a pasture where 2 or 3 cows were grazing. The first days were quiet, as he'd expected. The students behaved, but showed little interest in what he was trying to teach them. They all dressed impeccably, uniforms ironed, hair styled one of 3 ways, down, pulled into a ponytail, or combed back and held in place with a modest headband. Under no circumstances were they to cut it short, dye, tease, or highlight it, or do anything else that might attract attention. Most of the students came from towns in the south of the province, but there were also a few black girls from the Pacific coast, probably daughters of public officials and local teachers, granted scholarships or financial aid. Only 10 were from the dwarf city, and of those 10, half were pregnant. A girl who was showing under her baggy uniform sweater interrupted him during a lecture on Darwinism. She asked if God had made it so every animal, every plant, had its own purpose. And the biologist, surprised by the girl's sudden interest, but excited nonetheless at the prospect of teaching her something, launched into his explanation. Not necessarily. Some traits do develop to serve a particular purpose, but there are also many cases when evolution would seem to entirely contradict reason and, therefore, design. In other words, nature invents things constantly, but most of what it invents is useless for millennia, and it's not unusual for an adaptation to atrophy or alternatively change its function. For example, the avocado. The avocado is an excellent example. The tree began to produce a fruit that tasted so good it caught the attention of large mammals.